Is this the turning point for Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari? Or will another bitter episode in its most complicated season until now? Lewis Hamilton arrived in Ferrari in 2025 with the promise of a rebirth. The expectation was gigantic, a heptacampion joining the most iconic rash of motoring. It was a combination that, on paper, evoked the hope of a new golden chapter. But Formula One, as always, is relentless with names and yields only to the results. The hard truth is that the idyll between Hamilton and Ferrari has begun with more shadows than lights. And the first great reality slap came long before anyone would have imagined. Hamilton has been his own hardest judge. And that was evidenced in Spa, where after an early elimination in Q1, he did not hesitate to assume all the fault. He apologized to the team, the engineers, the fans. There were no excuses, there was no diversion of responsibility. Only self-criticism. A reflection of the character of a champion who, even when things do not come out, maintains the same level of demand that led him to the top of the sport. This is the Lewis Hamilton that arrives in Hungary, one that has suddenly faced the complexity of changing environment, technical philosophy, and internal dynamics. One that has had to be rebuilt from the most basic, confidence in your work tool. And one that, despite the falls, has not released the rope. If something has demonstrated in these months, it is not willing to finish its story in F1 as a retired champion. His gaze is still loaded with fire. But for now, that fire is contained in a body that has not yet found how to channel it in results. Hungary, perhaps, will be the spark that turns it on. The Belgian Grand Prix at Spa-Francorchamps was not a statistical turning point for Lewis Hamilton. He did not win. He did not go to the podium. He did not classify in the first rows. And yet, it was perhaps the most emotionally powerful moment of his season. Because in that weekend marked by climatic uncertainty, by classification errors, and a Ferrari that seemed completely lost, Hamilton brought out something that is not measured in chronometers or in time leaves. His competitive spirit. Spa began with an absolute disaster. In the main classification session was eliminated in Q1, a scene that seemed unthinkable just 2 years ago. But it was not there. In the classification for the sprint, it fell prematurely. The reactions were immediate. Hard holders, social networks full of criticism, analysts questioning whether his signing for Ferrari had been correct. It was a Friday of those that can destroy the moral of any pilot. But not Hamilton's. On Saturday, with mixed conditions, sprint began. And there appeared the Hamilton that the world knew for more than a decade. The one that does not give up, which converts the disadvantage into the opportunity. He left from the bottom with intermediate tires on a changing track and began to weave a memorable comeback. It wasn't just that he advanced pilots with less rhythm. It was how he did. With each maneuver, he seemed to erase the disaster of the previous days. He advanced in areas where most wouldn't even try. He drew alternative lines, risked to enter the car spray on the front, and kept control in each curve outlet. From 18th to 7th. That was the tour. 7 positions won in a circuit where to advance is complex, in unstable climatic conditions, with a Ferrari that was not in its best way. That effort earned him the public's recognition, who chose him Pilot of the Day. A symbolic but significant gesture, because it reflected that, despite everything, there was a communion between the figure of Hamilton and the essence of Formula One: resilience, show, excellence under pressure. But beyond the result, what was seen in Spa was a flash of what Hamilton can still offer. In his own words, he explained that these adverse conditions were the ones he enjoys. That grew running in rain, on unpredictable surfaces, and that he has learned to love those contexts. It was, in short, a character sample. And not any character. One forged for almost 2 decades to the highest level of competition, which does not bend to criticism, that does not dissolve in the comfort of a millionaire contract, but continues to seek excellence even in adverse scenarios. The most interesting thing about this comeback is what left between the lines. Because although he did not correct his position in the championship or solve the structural problems of Ferrari, he sent a clear message: Hamilton has not lost its essence. He has not lowered his arms. It is still willing to fight with the weapons you have, even if they are not the best. And when a pilot with his talent finds internal motivation to continue fighting, he can change everything. Because then no longer runs with technique. Run with pride, with memory, with history. In Spa we did not see the dominant champion of yesteryear. We saw something even more valuable, to the indomitable competitor who, even injured, still has the strength to bite. And that, in a sport as mental as Formula One, can be the beginning of something much bigger. The statistics did not change, but the perception changed. And in this game, that can make a difference in what is coming. Hungary could be the scenario where this fire contained is finally released. The 2025 Hungary Grand Prix is not simply the next race in the calendar. It is an emotional, strategic, and symbolic border for Lewis Hamilton. There is no more maneuver margin. It is the last chance before the summer break to change the course of a season that, until now, has been full of frustrations. And this circuit, Hungaroring, could be both a bomb and a trap. Because while its technical characteristics can level the field and allow the pilot to mark a greater difference, they can also expose any lack of trust between car and driver. Hungaroring is a clue where precision, constancy, and rhythm management are more important than pure power. There are no long lines that save cars with faster peak speed. There are no generous overtaking areas. It is a narrow, scrambled circuit, where to advance is a millimeter art and classification performance becomes critical. All this plays in principle in favor of Hamilton. Because if there is something that has always been able to do, it is to extract the maximum in technical circuits, especially when the race becomes a tactical sequence where each return is negotiated with intelligence rather than with muscle. In addition, there is a key psychological factor. Hamilton has won 8 times in Hungary, an absolute record. It is his talisman circuit, a place where he has written some of its most memorable pages. There he won in mixed conditions, dominated in dry, traced from the bottom. Hungaroring is not just a path for him. It is a scenario with history, an emotional extension of its legacy. And that matters. Because the great champions not only run against the rivals, they also do it against the weight of their past. And when they return to scenarios that gave them glory, they often find inspiration to meet themselves. But this time is different. It arrives with a Ferrari that, although it has received new updates, remains a temperamental car, difficult to refine, especially on weekends where each session counts. The classification is presented as a fire test. In a circuit where going out in the middle part of the grille can condemn you to a stagnation race, Hamilton must perform from the first Friday. There is no space for errors. There are no excuses that are worth. Because if it fails here, the summer break will not be a break. It will be a long and painful pause in which each negative result is amplified, each criticism becomes more acute, and every doubt about its signing by Ferrari becomes a sentence. In addition, the context of the championship is not favorable. Leclerc continues to add valuable points. McLaren dominates with an intractable Norris. Red Bull, despite the internal chaos, keeps Verstappen in the fight for the title. Mercedes resurfaces with Russell. And while everyone advances, Hamilton is still looking for its support point. That is why Hungary becomes an unavoidable trial. Not so much for the points, but for the message. Because if you achieve a good classification, a solid or even an unexpected podium, you can go to rest knowing that there is still a way to go dignity. But if the result is another gray weekend, the narrative of a champion who has lost course will consolidate strongly. Hungary will not be any battle. It will be a declaration of intentions. The last bullet before F1 enters pause. The last opportunity to change the tone of a story that has so far been disappointment. Hamilton knows it. He feels it. And that pressure, far from crushing it, could be just what he needs to shine again. Because if there is something that has defined his career, it is the ability to answer when everyone doubts. And today everyone doubts. Hungary will then be the scene where we know if there is still room for redemption. Or if this stage in Ferrari will be remembered as a broken promise. At this time of the 2025 season, the case of Lewis Hamilton transcends the purely sports. We are not simply talking about a pilot with technical difficulties. We talk about a 7-time world champion, an icon of the category, a generational reference that has chosen to close his career in Ferrari, the most legendary team of Formula One. This decision was not taken lightly. It was a movement full of symbolism, of purpose, of narrative. A conscious attempt to write a last epic chapter. But that chapter, until now, has been more tragedy than redemption. And this is where Hungary takes on an unusual weight. Because the summer break is not just a space for physical rest. It is a pause that changes the conversation. What happens in Budapest will be the taste with which the paddock, the media, and the fans stay for weeks. If Hamilton manages to reverse the trend, even with a clean weekend, without errors, with competitive rhythm, and especially with a solid classification, the story will change tone. You will begin to speak of adaptation, evolution, resilience. But if, on the other hand, the story is repeated, the speech will harden. They will talk about decline, of erroneous signing, of a Ferrari that cannot wait or build around a legend in transition. That is the magnitude of what is at stake. There are no enough points to change their position in the championship, but there are arguments that can define the emotional course of their season. Is Lewis Hamilton even capable of competing with the best on equal terms? Can it be a driving force for Ferrari? Or is it simply a glorious name living the last bars of an unrepeatable era? And that is the question we want to leave open. Because beyond technical analysis, beyond numbers, this sport lives with emotions, stories, of moments that transcend asphalt. Do you think Hamilton can reverse the situation and start his comeback in Hungary? Or do you consider that we are already seeing the definitive sunset of one of the greatest of all time? Leave your opinion in the comments. We want to read you. We want you to be part of this conversation.